to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, but we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. Guys, as fate would have had it, last year, me and my good friend, in fact, I'm just going to welcome on the screen now. It's Mr. Jim King. How you doing, Jim?
I'm all right.
May as well join me for this little kind of intro because last year, I believe it was you who suggested to me and some other friends that we watch back Twin Peaks from the beginning all the way through. And we decided to expand that mission and make it all the books and the return and everything. And a grand old time we did indeed have of doing that. But it's just a very, very weird twist of fate that the man himself, David Lynch, yeah, my buddy Dave Lynch.
David Lynch, yeah, Big Dave.
David Lynch, Big Dave Lynch. David Lynch happened to sadly pass away just after that due to complications of some breathing difficulties he had, and I believe it was exacerbated by the Hollywood fires, sadly. But me and Jim talked and we said, it's like, look, wouldn't it be fun to just go through all of his films? And as I am still slowly building pieces in place ready for the relaunch of the Dr. Squee Show, and you might get a few here and there, like Ray O'Leary, which you can check out now from Taskmaster New Zealand. I actually got to see him the other night live. Absolutely hilarious, amazing guy. Anyway, I digress. But while we're getting ready for some more interviews, me and Jim are going to talk through the David Lynch films, and we've started with his first two, the black and white origin story, if you like, of Eraserhead and The Elephant Man. Now, Jim, I know there is so I could say a manifesto essentially on The Elephant Man and how good it is, and kind of just I think I said to you, I'm going to give you a really shit film school thesis on it. I'm that excited. Eraserhead, I'm not saying I'm not excited, but I don't know how the fuck we're going to talk about it. It is weirdness personified, and that's on the Lincoln scale.
Yes. I think arguably either this one or Inland Empire, which interestingly bookend his career, and there are things about how they were made and things like that that, you know, I don't know if he knew Inland Empire was going to be his last film, but as it's turned out that way, that there is kind of a symmetry, I think, between them. But what I'm getting at is either his first film or his last film are the most challenging, shall we say, the least approachable, probably.
It dares you to like, you know, look, this film is going to be so well made. There's going to be such interesting ideas and interesting, like, there's always going to be something on the screen to grab you. But I'm going to dare you to like it, because I'm going to make it just so good, like just so technically good and so interesting and so kind of like it draws you in his worlds. But it's going to be just like you try and get a plot, like you try and tell me the plot of this film. I just like the IMDb's got one, but I'm like, I mean,
yeah,
like it says like he's in an industrial world and he struggles with his wife and mutant baby. It's like, yeah, technically that stuff does happen, but I wouldn't say that's the plot of the film, because
no, that is the thing. I think this one, it is very, very difficult to impose a narrative framework onto it, and I think as human beings, we like to organize things into chronological narratives, and even more so with film, because film, primarily the way we consume it is in the form of narrative, of stories. And yes, it can be used for other things, but when we see a film that's released at the cinema, or a film that's shown on TV or on your streaming service or whatever, instinctually we think this is going to tell me a story, and we expect that we will be able to follow that story from A to B to C. And this doesn't do that. I
It's
think
pretty standard
is
3-act structure.
no, it's not. It's not. And I think
Right.
part of that is, this was made when he was just coming out of film school, and people are encouraged in film school to be a bit more experimental, a bit more out there, and to experiment with what can I do with the medium of film. And as we know, David Lynch has he immersed himself in the arts anyway. Like he was into art, as in drawing,
Yeah.
painting. He was into music, and those art forms we don't think of as being as rigidly sort of locked into a structure as we do with film.
True.
And I think what David Lynch was doing here, and arguably throughout his career, but we'll talk about the others as we get there. I think he was using film as an artistic expression and going,
Oh, definitely.
okay, this
Yeah.
is a medium. It doesn't mean I have to do what's expected within it.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a through line throughout all of his work. It's a yeah, like you say, it's an expression of something, not necessarily as rigidly stuck to the kind of 3-act structure. There's that is in there, and there's clearly a love of traditional film as well. However, you're never going to get, like, Twin Peaks was never going to have a bow on it at the end of Return.
No.
I kind of wish there was a little bit more of a suggestion of an ending, but you never know with Lynch. You can get anything from something which kind of does feel like an ending occasionally, not very often, but occasionally, or something that is just a wonderful sort of like just concept, or or it doesn't end, or it's like, because their life doesn't end. That thing goes on, whatever.
Yeah,
in the
and I
piece that he's
think
doing.
I know that what we've done is decided to cover them chronologically, but these two films do throw up an interesting contrast, because you've got Eraserhead, which, as I say, possibly is his least conventional film, and then you've got Elephant Man, which it's either that or The Straight Story that are his most conventional film. I would probably say the Straight Story even more so, but
I think like it's arguable because the story itself it's based on is a little more straightforward, like The Straight Story. That's obviously right through the core. Whereas this story, like his telling of it, I don't think is in any way outlandish from representing the events. He's got some very clever subtext in there, clever mirrors between the kind of like underworld that the Elephant Man is subjected to begin with, the high society and how they deal with him. There's so much clever stuff in there, but it's like I don't think there's anything he does to zhuzh up the kind of like strange in it. He doesn't, there's a few kind of cuts and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of bits, but we'll get to that.
But I'm just saying, I think that's more part. Anyway, right. Like you
we're
say,
talking about Eraserhead. We must talk about it. We will make sense of Eraserhead.
Oh, Jesus Christ, we haven't got that kind of time. Two things. One, first of all, I'm sorry if I'm playing with my eyes. A little while before we came on, I was rubbing some capsicum, which is basically just chili cream, into my neck, and I did one of these. And,
you did that. Yeah, that's a bad move.
So it's just, yeah. Anyway, and the other point was, just very quickly before we get into these two films, for me, this kind of I'm very thinly Lynch watched, which kind of is very weird, very off brand for me, really, because you'd think he'd be right in my alley. I love Twin Peaks. I came to that kind of when I was an adult, and I think just for whatever reason I thought, oh, I must check out the rest of this guy's films. I've heard he's a genius and everything, and just never really got around to it. So there's kind of like a few of them I've seen, but just one or two here or there. How about yourself, Jim? Just going into our Lynchian journey.
Yeah, I mean, I had seen the majority of them.
Hey, Eraserhead's in the house. Sorry,
Eraserhead's in the house. Oh, okay. Explain yourself, Eraserhead. Oh,
I was going to say Eraserhead, please, as we go through, helps out as much as you can. Sorry, Jim.
Says good luck making sense of that. Oh dear. I mean, if the person who's got Eraserhead as their username doesn't make.
Actually, that's a really good point. And it's not like Eraserhead wouldn't be a popular handle. Like, that guy's got in there early for that as well.
But yeah, weird as it sounds, I never watched Eraserhead until very recently, and I never watched Inland Empire until incredibly recently. And I think the reason, probably two reasons, like, I was that impressed by the films of his that I'd seen that I almost didn't want to risk watching one that I didn't enjoy, if that makes sense. So I kind of wanted to keep it in this David Lynch bubble where, as far as I was concerned, he could do no wrong. And yeah, I don't know. I think I always felt like I was, like in Lost, what's it? Desmond. He's got a book, hasn't he? He's got the last Charles Dickens book that he's not read. Yes. And he says, I take it with me wherever I go, and if I ever think it's near the end, I'm going to read it. But I always want there to be one that I've never done. And so I think I was kind of doing that with Inland Empire, like, don't watch his last film yet. And then when he passed, I thought, well, now's probably as good a time as ever. So yeah, so this one fairly new to me, Eraserhead, but I think
this is definitely new to me.
To say it's as sort of experimental as it is, I do think elements of it have kind of seeped into popular culture, which you wouldn't necessarily think with a film like, certainly the image from the poster of Jack Nance and his hair's stood up, like I think that's a really familiar image. I mean, I don't know whether it is more broadly, but because we all have our own little bubble, don't we? And I suppose I follow a lot of film stuff and read film magazines and things like that. So maybe that's why I'm so familiar with it. But I feel like that image is identifiable as Eraserhead, even if you've not seen it.
Yeah, it's some posters, some album covers. There's some images you couldn't tell someone even necessarily what it's for, what it's called, but it's just so recognizable. Like, you got that picture of the diner in America, like with just a cop in the window. Couldn't tell you the name of that view on a diner or something, like, God knows. But it's just that iconic, and I think you're right that it has got to that kind of status. Also, something really interesting you were saying about like the some of the effects and some of the things in here which have slipped into popular culture. This is this 77?
77, same year as Star Wars.
77, and yeah, Star Wars, great example. So, like, some of the stuff which they did with the claymation, I think, used somewhere in there. You've got loads of video effects, basically, which didn't seem like I can't remember seeing many about that time. And if they're coming out about the same time as Star Wars, that's not bad going to have that on, that in there at such a kind of early time. So it's kind of like, I think Lynch's vision and Lynch's want to create different stuff, necessity is the mother of invention and all that. I think he just had such an out there brain. He almost had to
certainly
or to create things, because he created quite a few effects himself, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. And reportedly this was made for something like $100,000, which is just it's just crazy. I mean, it doesn't look like it only cost that much. Obviously, Star Wars came out the same year. I'm not saying it looks as, but it does look incredible. And, part of that possibly is filming it in black and white. That can cover a multitude of sins. But it doesn't look like a cheap film. It doesn't look like a student film. It looks like a film from an assured filmmaker who knows what they're doing, even if the audience has absolutely no idea what they're doing. But
and to that point with the black and white, I'm going to assume, even though it's his first film, so there is and there would be good reasons to use black and white for the cost. But I get the feeling that it was a choice. I think he would have chosen black and white. I think that just
quite possibly so. I mean,
because it's a very bleak world we're painting here. Like this again, like I say, this is a challenging film. It's like just to sit in that bleakness, and I don't know, for whatever reason, just some reasons you're in whatever mood. I was just a little bit, I don't know, just the anxiety levels might have been a little bit higher for whatever reason. Not that I felt particularly anxious, just
yeah,
sometimes. And watching this film in that mood, I mean, Jesus Christ, like it does challenge you, this movie. I think.
I do think there's bits of it that are very, very funny though. Like Eraserhead says, I believe that's correct, but it took 7 years to film it all. Yeah, because he was, sort of finishing up film school and filming it as and when he could. Like, I think one of the trivia things on IMDb about it, but I think it's been cited numerous places, is that there's a part in the film where Jack Nance said it in an interview, like he gets up to open a door, and that's one shot, and then the shot of him coming out of the door was filmed something like 18 months later. It's crazy.
And there's so much. Just like Jack Nance, let's just talk about him for a second, because first of all, I didn't recognize him to begin with. My most recent frame of reference was watching back Twin Peaks, but he was in Blazing Saddles as well, if I'm remembering correctly.
Blazing Saddles, there's a film.
I believe he's one of the cowboys around the fire at one stage.
Right.
Shows in there, like he's one of the people from the village. Anyway,
and he's in nearly every David Lynch project. So,
and just such a, I don't know. Again, he's just one of these kind of like Lynchian finds. He finds these people who've just got a certain particular NG style of delivery.
Yeah,
he always looks puzzled and bemused by life, no matter what part he's playing. But it doesn't mean it's not a powerful character. It's just almost like life is confusing to characters in some way or another, or he's frustrated with life. That's kind of the NG he always brings.
Yeah, and it was
loads of other layers.
It was him that delivered the "she's dead, wrapped in plastic," which I think is arguably the most iconic line from Twin Peaks.
Oh, I don't know. Damn fine cup of coffee.
Yeah, true. So yes, there's a few things I want to sort of try and tease out a little bit with the film.
Can we just bring the Eraserhead?
Yeah,
they kept running out of money and could only continue shooting once they had more money again. Yep. Cast and crew were working odd jobs to help fund the film. Wow.
It shows a lot of faith, doesn't it?
Yeah. Sorry. I'm just gonna. It just reminded me, because I sent you, there was Sissy Spacek. She
yes,
because I saw her name in the credits in the thanks, and I was like, well, she got to do this. So I looked it up, and yeah, she helped fund this. Which she had been a young actor at the time. Really, the money she made, it would have been probably decent, but it's like you're still building your sort of wealth as an actor at that stage. So to put this money in and to put that faith in a director, and you're well placed, but that's a ballsy act by her as well, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a little bit of a theory, and I've nothing to base this on whatsoever, other than observation, and we'll sort of maybe revisit it as we go through his filmography. But I have a feeling that David Lynch, obviously, he was very charismatic. He had a real sort of likability to him and everything, and clearly he was extremely talented. But I do wonder if there were people within Hollywood who sort of looked at him and thought, "Oh, you know, this guy could be really, really good. Let's let's let him make this weird Eraserhead one, and then once he's got that out of his system, we'll get him doing more mainstream things." And I think you can see a little bit of that trajectory. Sort of, there's this, then there's Elephant Man, then there's June. And then I think it was at that point that he went, "Oh, sod this! I'm just going to do my own thing." But
I
we're
think
getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm going to go. I think it's a different course, though. Just while we're on that point, I think it's more the sort of the Kevin Smith model, where he made Clerks, also in black and white. Then the studio were like, "Oh wow!" Like, you know, because that came through Cannes and through Miramax. Kind of believing in Kevin, just like people took a punt on him basically on that, and because it did so ridiculously well and got all the plaudits, then they were like, "Brilliant! What are you doing next? We'll give you like all this money." And he actually asked for less money because he didn't want that much. Like, you know, Mallrats doesn't need to have that budget, but you know, they forced him to have a certain amount of money. That's how like Hollywood does it, and they kind of just try and build people into something. Like, I think you're right that they were trying to build him towards something, but I just think it's like, I think it was more this happened to work and they just gave him a bit of money going, it's like, "Oh yeah, whatever, like, yeah, like we'll give you some money, that sounds interesting, we'll probably make some art house money, yeah, I'll do fine, whatever, you know, we'll probably make our money back in a bit more." You know, I think that's the kind of gamble they were making, and then because it did well, then they invested as opposed to the other way around. But other than that, I think you're probably on the money there, because at one stage Kevin Smith was saying they were like offering him scripts at the time. They offered him Beetlejuice Goes to Hawaii, apparently, was one of the scripts they offered him.
Right.
So we almost had a second Beetlejuice back then, which thankfully, by the sounds of that one, probably not best.
It'd probably been better than the one we got, but never mind.
I was not a fan either.
I was not. Right.
But anyway, yeah. So
but yeah,
but yeah, so it's like yeah. And Kevin Smith was like, "Oh, I like that would have been great. It would have been like, you know, it would have paid very well and it would have been an easy gig, but I just want to make the films that only I can make." And that's what he went to, and that's the Lynch story. I think he kind of like,
I think David Lynch,
well, they let him get away with enough of what he wanted to do. Then he was like, "Nah, I'm just going to make the films I want to make."
I think I think the next two films after this one are something of an aberration in terms of it for different reasons, but anyway, we'll get to them. So Eraserhead, then I think it's generally accepted that if the film is indeed about anything, it's about anxieties over parenthood, but presented in a very abstract kind of way, with, you know, he has to raise this thing rather than a human child.
And right from the get-go, if I might just jump in on that bit, just right from the get-go, nothing is explained. It's like it's you have you had sex with this one? So, a bit personal. It's like, "No, have you had sex with it?" Like, "Yeah, okay, we had sex." It's like, "Okay, you've got a baby now," but it was a couple of weeks ago. Well, here it is, and it's a mutant in the terms used by the movie, by the way, not my choice.
And she says like, "Oh, but it's not a baby. I don't know if it is a baby." And then before that, even, like, it opens with this sequence where it's his face and there's a planet and there's a guy like pulling levers and there's a like spermy type thing floating.
Didn't that remind you of so much? Like even some of that stuff in the opening shot of Lynch's first movie reminded me of The Return. The electrical sparks which were in there.
Absolutely.
The sperm thing reminded me of the evolution of the hand.
The evolution, and also the thing that sort of spews out the orbs and
there was a few moments of the creation of Bob I saw.
Yeah, this really, reminded me, but only reminded me because I saw the other one first. So I think there's imagery that he's always been playing around with, and like the guy pulling the levers reminded me of what were they called, the woodsman in Twin Peaks: The Return. So I do feel like he's revisiting a lot of his not themes, a lot of his visuals
Well, that's the thing. That's
throughout
it.
his career.
I think you've hit nail on something you said earlier, actually. That because he thinks in terms of art as opposed to, he's not just through terms of film, although he does think very filmatically. He also thinks in terms of art, and in art, it's very Dali-esque to have like these symbols and those images, like the melting clocks. Maybe the kind of weird evolution of the arm is the melting clocks of Lynch. Like, I mean, I joke, but it's like you've got these zigzag floors and stuff as well. And
yeah, the zigzag floors of that.
The iconic, like they're so iconically known from Twin Peaks, and here they are, so many like a good decade and a half earlier.
It's definitely imagery that he felt like he wanted to keep revisiting and coming back to.
Sorry, you just perfectly segued into Eraserhead.
There's a bunch of references to Eraserhead in The Return. Yeah, it feels like Lynch coming full, so he does. And you know, we'll talk about Inland Empire when we get there, and how I think there is things that resonate with this film, but I definitely think you could argue that Twin Peaks: The Return for him was his way of kind of bringing his career full circle and putting a full stop on it. You know, notably, like I think we talked about it a bit when we covered it, but the fact that he brings in Laura Dern as Diane and has Coop and Diane be the two to cross over into whatever that other universe was. You know, that's very metatextual. Like, here's my two, that's my leading man and that's my leading lady, and I'm going to put them together as I close out my career.
Yeah, and I think it was also it was that thing. It's like I hope I get to do this again. I feel like there was some hope that he'd get to it again, and maybe even the third thing. But it's like, get the feeling that might not be the case. So, like, you know, let's leave it all on the field anyway, even if I get to return.
Yeah, I think there were ideas, but you know, we will never know, and I think we shouldn't ever know now, because even if Mark Frost wanted to do it, I feel like there was a special chemistry with the two of them, and it'd be like I've not read it, but there was the Wheel of Time, the book series, and he died before he finished it, and they got someone else to finish the last book, and it just feels like, oh. And I know people who are fans of that series who say, well, I don't feel like it actually ended because it wasn't him writing the end of it. And I think I'd feel like that if anyone else picked up Twin Peaks.
Oh my god, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and another thing, they got someone else to write a Hitchhiker's Guide, but just wasn't the same. It's like they didn't quite get how to use the language. It's like, you know, it's like Sunny Zayford, Beeblebrox, and Ford Prefects were trying to look cool in front of each other. The point was to try and, like, or, you know, to go, it's like, hey, don't go on any adventures without me. It's like, no, they don't. Like, they were too cool to say that. Like, they were too up their own asses. Like, in the first book, there's even this thing about, like, you know, there's Zayford's trying to stand particularly nonchalantly for when Ford enters the thing, so he can pretend he hasn't noticed he's coming in. And like, they write like all about this in the book, and it's like, anyway, but that's very off topic. But yeah.
So I have a theory. Do you want my theory trying to underpin some of this with some semblance of narrative?
We're here, so we should at least give it a stab.
Right.
Do you want some Eraserhead stuff first?
Let's have Eraserhead stuff.
Let's just catch up with full circle. We've had that one. Eraserhead, and by the way, Eraserhead as in the commentator, not the film that we're talking about. Just in case any confusion. I love Mark Frost. I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves.
I agree.
Passed with David, I'm sure Frost knows as well. Peaks was best when they were both working together. And yeah, and I would say, I think that's why, like, the the books worked pretty well because it was more where it was a history. It felt in the Peaks world, but it could be his own thing. And that's why. And the second one was very rushed and very kind of like, oh yeah. And by the way, let's just do another one about the last few years, and it just didn't work. And God, if they ever did that to a Twin Peaks, it's like, you know, just don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Sorry.
I think we've just got to leave it, haven't we? But so my attempt at explaining what's going on here. So we have the lady who's in the radiator, and when Henry sort of sees a vision of her, what she's doing is she's stamping out all the little sperms.
Yes.
And then later in the film, we find out that the baby, in inverted commas, has like these weird, like warty sort of shit on his face.
Yes.
And there is a very brief flash later in the film of the guy who's pulling the levers, and he has warty stuff on his face. My theory is that the lady in the radiator is trying to give Henry a message that this child is going to ruin your life. So what he decides to do at the end is effectively he kills the baby. He takes the nappy off and it's all guts and everything hanging out, and it stabs it. And I think this is a causality loop that we've got going on, because I think the presence of the warts is to cue us into the fact that the baby grows up to be the guy pulling the levers. And if we watch the guy pulling the levers, he pulls the levers and the spermy thing comes out. And it comes out of...
Sounds like a very weird biology lesson. Sorry.
Yeah. And it comes out of Henry's mouth. So I think that is symbolic of him creating, of the baby being created. It's
Right.
almost saying, you know, if you make sperm, that will make babies. So, you know, for anyone who's listening,
So it is a biology lesson.
It's yes. So,
And wait. And if he then puts it in his mouth, is that teaching them? You know, it's okay.
Well,
It's okay. Like whatever you want. We're all welcoming here.
I'm doing a theory here. I think I've done well for it
I
to
was
be this
being
coherent.
pro-LGBTQ. It's a very, very subtle LGBTQ plus pro through line. That's what I'm going for.
Okay, it might well be. It could well be.
It's a woke agenda. We must stop it. No, sorry. No.
David Lynch definitely had a woke agenda. You can tell. I mean, you know. So my theory then. The film starts with the guy pulling the strings, which causes the birth of the baby, which ruins Henry's life, which he's warned about by the woman in the radiator. When he decides to kill the baby, that means that the baby doesn't grow up to be the guy pulling the strings, which means the baby isn't born, which effectively takes it out of the loop of causality. And the film finishes with him hugging the sperm stampy radiator lady. And that's as if to say, you know, good job, well done. So that's
the baby turns into Gormangozia for a minute in the end.
Quite probably.
It did look like the same oatmeal-y substance.
So that is kind of my rough take on if you had to apply some kind of circular narrative to it. That's about as close as I can hazard.
Okay. Brilliant work, my friend. We're going to have a razor heads, and then we're going to go for my take I've got on it. So Eraserhead. I've heard people take a religious approach to it, suggesting that the girl in the radiator is actually Mother Mary healing Henry and the baby from the plague of the of the Wartsman original
Wartsman.
sin.
Okay, so she's protecting them from the guy pulling the levers. Yeah. And
Okay.
Lynch did say that it was his most spiritual film. And it's a really funny interview because he says something like, "Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film." And they say, "Will you elaborate on that?" And he just says, "No." So there you go.
So my theory, I think this represents parents who have a child who has a disfiguring disability, which would also feed into the next work we are to talk about, The Elephant Man. And Eraserhead, elaborate on that? No. Fair. So, yeah.
That's the interview I was talking about.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it represents that. I think the idea is that there's the shock pregnancy, which they've used as kind of like metaphor of like, oh, you had sex with her. Well, there's a baby here. It's sort of almost mocking. It feels like the sex education videos in some way, maybe as well in there. They do find themselves in this position where they are out their depth, where they don't feel like they can care for the baby. But even as they're struggling, even as the woman's going out, she's going, it's like, I've just got to go. I've just got to get out of here. Like, but you better take care of that baby, because she obviously still cares, but she's struggling to cope with this. In this case, they're showing it as a mutant baby. I want to be very clear. I'm using it specifically about this one baby, but I think as a metaphor for children with disabilities, just to separate those two things off, very importantly. But anyway, so I think it's like, so like even him kind of turning to having an affair, which can happen quite commonly in couples who have this kind of problem with how they adjust to a child with disabilities, and there can be so many different reactions to that. It can cause couples to split up, and then ultimately he seems to go mad and kill the baby, which again is something, can be a consequence. Like, it's something which has happened, before. And so I think the baby then kind of sort of almost exploding and blowing up their world, I think represents just the fact they've ruined their lives. They've ruined their world. They've kind of like, they weren't coping, but then after doing this, they just break and the world explodes.
Yeah, I'll go with that as well.
And there was a woman in the radiator.
And there was also the
well.
the bit that gives it its title, which is this dream where his head falls off and a kid nicks it and it gets turned into literally an eraser.
Because it was off his head, like at that time of the movie. That's
certainly a bit that happens in the film.
Yeah, I mean, is anyone going to try and justify that in our breakdowns in any real way?
I do just think this is him playing with the language of cinema and playing with ideas that are on his mind, and I do think it's experimental. I also think it's great fun trying to find meaning in it and trying to impose or find the narrative within it. But I don't think it's necessarily there. But that's in no way to decry it as a work of art. I just think there isn't necessarily a narrative to this other than, a very sort of loose kind of thing.
If I might, though, I think I've got it. It all makes sense. Of course, the scene with the pencils when his head falls off. Again, I think that is in a moment of not coping. And then they're making these pencils. The pencils are all uniform. They're all made to look the same. Everything has to be identical. You have to fit in and to conform to society, which they're trying to push him to do as he struggles with this situation with, as I say, what I see as a metaphor for a disabled child. So the pencils represent them trying to make everyone the same when they're not. And what happens when you are different, or when you have to deal with a situation where someone has different needs. So go on, there you go. I'm going to throw
There
that
you
one
go.
in
There.
there.
No, you know what? We're going to go with that. We've solved it. We've solved Eraserhead.
I
Come
knew
back
we
in a few weeks for Inland Empire.
also, something else I was going to say about this one before we move on. What were you saying? There was something you said which I was like, like I missed.
Everything I say is fascinating. So, you know, it
Course,
could
my
be
friend.
literally anything I've said in the last 40 minutes. No, I don't know.
No, that's gone. Anyway, if it comes to it, I'll probably go, like as I have want to do. Let's go on to the Elephant Man now.
The Elephant Man.
And what a it's one of those films which I grew up with, and when I found out it was by David Lynch, the same man who makes Twin Peaks and all these other weird and wonderful films, I'm kind of really surprised. Then you watch it again, knowing that, and suddenly, you know,
Yeah,
like you see all these moments, all these kind of clever takes, all these, like, you know, because Lynch is so known for his wonderful surrealism and for his artistic interpretation of life, not just presenting life as you were saying. Like, we forget that's not everything that he is. You know, if you can take those things away and still have a very recognizably Lynchian film, and this is, but it's just you've got to know it to look for it. You know, sometimes, and it's
I
all there. There's so
agree.
many things he does in other films, just they aren't the surreal things like necessarily.
And I do think there were times in his career where he sort of set himself almost a bit of a challenge. Like, I know this is the case with The Straight Story, which we'll talk about when we get there, but I do feel like he's done, at this point in his career, he's done Eraserhead, so he's done super experimental. And what's to say this isn't him going, well, can I make a straight up biographical drama? And, you know, like you say, his style does seep in. Like, there's a surreal opening sequence, there's quite a surreal sort of dream sequence around the middle of the film. But other than that, it is pretty much played fairly straight as a drama. And I do feel like maybe Lynch just thought, well, let's see if I can do that.
I mean, I think it's almost simpler than that. I feel like he made this first film, and I think that was those real strange worlds were always in his head. And then when he came across, I don't know if he already knew the story of the Elephant Man. I don't know where the genus of it is, like where he came up with the idea to do this. But I think the story of, like, in all his work, it's always about the outsider, the weirdo, the kind of other realm. Like, you know, the Eraserhead, I actually thought kind of felt like it could have been its own third lodge, almost like it would fit into the Twin Peaks world very, very neatly. Whereas this is more about how the monster, like, you know, how someone who is different is perceived by society, how society are the real monsters. It's got that kind of like thing which goes back to Frankenstein, of the real monsters, the people around him and how they treat him. It is actually Frankenstein, not Frankenstein's monster, that is the true monster. You know, it very much feels like that to me. So I feel like it's just a faux negative way of telling the same story of the outsider and how they're treated.
Yeah, I think so. But I would argue that at the level of the ways presenting it, it's much more conventional than the vast majority of his other work, as I say, perhaps the Straight Story aside. So to my mind, there's either a concession being made there to him going, right, I'm working within the mainstream, I'm going to make a mainstream film, or, as I say, I suspect that on some level he's thinking, can I work within this framework, and what can I do within that framework?
I wonder if something somewhere in the middle of that. because maybe it is the case of like, I would definitely believe the studio would come up to him and go and say, look, we loved how much money that made. We want you to make a film for us, which will also make us money. Could you make it not that kind of weird? Like, you know, I could totally see the studio doing that. Then I'm going to say, well, what's a story? What is a story I want to tell that is maybe more real world based, but still I can inject and is there in the story is the kind of thing, the outsider and that kind of story.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
that
agree
kind
with
of
you.
compromise. That sounds very plausible. Actually, now you say that, because yeah, the studio almost undoubtedly wanted him to dilute down, and I think he found a way of giving them what they thought they wanted, and not diluting a single thing down in this. I mean, this is a film which does appeal to art students. It appeals to people who like the weird and wonderful of Lynch.
Yeah, it
It appeals
does.
to a mainstream audience. It appeals to my parents. My dad would sit
That's
down
it.
and
Like,
it's I believe one of his favorites, Elephant Man.
yeah, like, and you know, it was Oscar nominated and things like that. And it at this point, you could imagine that David Lynch could have been heralded as, you know, wow, he's going to be the new whoever in terms of filmmaking. You know, he could have, had he been that way inclined, he could have just made conventional films for the rest of his career and probably made an absolute fortune out of doing so. But that isn't where his interests lie, you know.
I mean, that's the very kind of option. As I say, Kevin Smith had that moment. You've got Johnny Depp. Either someone said about him or he said it, that it's like, look, I could have had a career like Tom Cruise. That was kind of like what was put before me. But I want to do these kind of cool films. Like, these are the films I love. These are the kind of weird worlds. And I'll do as many part of Caribbean movies as you want, because I love them and I love that world. That's great fun. But then I get to do some really cool, weird shit, like, you know, Kevin Smith's Tusk, you know, for instance. And so it's so brave, like just to say, it's like, no matter what happens, it's going to be my vision. Like, even if I get to no money to make my films, I have to make them on a shoestring, and if people see them, they are going to see the film I want to make. And to me, this one is like, also, I think where, as I say, I haven't seen that many Lynch films over the years, and I'm really already enjoying this and looking forward to all the rest. And this is one which I think, like the first film, I would say probably, I remember watching Requiem for a Dream and thinking, it's like, well, that's one film I'm very glad I've seen that I never want to see again. I watched it a second time and I was right. It is so harrowing. It is genius, but it's very hard to watch. It's so difficult, so bleak, and I feel like Eraserhead. It's like, not never. In 10 years, like, I can come back to it, like, but I need 10 years to decompress from what I've just seen. But whereas The Elephant Man is one which I feel like I've seen so many times during my life, that when you're a kid, you're like, oh wow, this is something that can happen, like genetic mutation, you know, mutations of birth, and this was a natural guy who existed. And, you know, you see it with sort of that wonder, and you kind of get a bit bored when they do the beard stroking talking, which then when you get a bit older, you go, oh no, that beard stroking talking is actually genius dialogue. This is an amazingly cleverly written film. And then you watch it when you're a bit later, and you go, kids, and you know, whatever stage you are in your life, this film can mean different things. And to me,
Definitely,
to me particularly this time, actually, I'll just quickly bring in Eraserhead's comments. The Elephant Man is still one of the most humbling and human films I've ever seen. The performances are in it are always heartbreaking. We will talk about the cast in a minute, but I just want to say, it's like, for me personally, this one really hit me like a ton of bricks this time, because as I, you know, mention every 5 minutes as much as I can, I've got ADHD and I was diagnosed in October. But when I saw this, and this is about people who are kind of like, who are different, who are isolated for their differences. And I think back then, at those times, people with autism would frequently be locked up and be treated as if they're, you know, or, you know, bipolar, any number of mental disorders. If you were bit outside the norm, you could be in Bedlam and treated like kind of like a piece just of garbage, like, you know, worse than garbage, worse than you treat a rat on the street. You know, it's like there, but for the grace of God, I really felt this time, and seeing, and sorry, but I am going to mention this because it's relevant. I think that as much as like we want to have fun when we're doing these things, I think if you ignore what's going on, sometimes too much, probably not healthy either. When I see people who are different in some country across the pond being treated in such inhumane ways as they are being already, as they're going to be increasingly, because they're different, and like, you know, the medications which are getting stripped back, and like I would be very surprised if like stuff like ADHD medications, which made such a huge difference in my life, stopped getting funded. All that was in this film, and it's so powerfully made. But again, to have all those different experiences with that same film, and the way it hit me this time, and the parallels to now are just fucking scary. And sorry, I will bring back together now, but like, yeah, I felt the need to say that. And yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, it's a story about estrangement and a story about compassion, and those universal things that we hit on again and again. And see, this is something that I think a lot of people misunderstand about David Lynch, is that they think of him as, oh, he's the guy who makes those weird films. And I think a lot of people think that that is somehow mutually exclusive to emotion and feeling, and I don't think that's the case with David Lynch. I think there's always a real heart to his work, and you know, perhaps this is showing it in, again, possibly the straight story, except you know those two are of a piece in a way. But this is possibly the most easy way for us to access it. But when I say us, I mean a general viewing audience. But I do think there's heart and emotion and beauty in throughout all of his work. Like Twin Peaks, you know, we talked about all sorts of things as we covered that, and you know, it is a misconception that just because some of his work is weird, for want of a better term, that there isn't a heart to it. You know, The Elephant Man is not the outlier in his filmography because it's a film with real emotion behind it. It may be an outlier because it's more traditional, more conventional in terms of the way it's built, but not because of the emotion it elicits.
And it was something I thought actually while watching Eraserhead, was that in this film we've got Anthony Hopkins, who's our kind hero, who can learn as well, which I really appreciated, but we'll talk about in a second. But it's like in that first film, it's almost like I wanted my Coop. I wanted my Anthony Hopkins character. I wanted that character of lightness, which we get so often in some of other Lynch's work. In that first one, it was pretty unrelenting without that character. And it's actually, I think that is pretty much just, that is the difference. It's like it just didn't have its Coop, you know, which a lot of Lynch films do. But yeah, I did want to speak about and you know what I was saying before, it basically gets down to, it's like this film is shows a very stark choice between just kindness and treating someone is a bit different, as you would, not only as you would anyone else, but how they need to be treated and how it's respectful to treat them. You know, having everyone the same isn't the same as kind of like treating someone where they live and what, you know, what they need. But anyway, I digress a little bit. But I really love that Anthony Hopkins character. It's like, yes, he was kind. Yes, he did care about this person deeply. But, you know, they without hammering it, like, you know, they didn't have one moment where the scientists were putting him on display in an obvious way. But it's just, by degrees, he was being used and being treated by society the same way as he was by the Carnival Barker or freak show guy, whatever he was kind of calling himself. And it's like there was one bit where, like at the beginning, where he goes to see the Elephant Man, John Merrick, sorry, and he goes, "Oh, I'd like to see him," and the guy who owns the freak show calls to the kid, get him to turn to the left, turn straight, And then you've got a scene of about 5 minutes later where you've got them in the medical kind of society, where it's like, could you get him to turn to the left? It's like, and one of the orderlies like, yes, could you turn to the left here and turn to the, and it was just such a mirror, and it was very nice, very subtle, but very apparent that society, you know, it's not just the poor in society which treat people badly.
No, and there is this thing of, even though they take him away from imprisonment, if you like, within the circus, he's still treated as a spectacle to some degree. It's still, you know, even within high class society, so come round and see this guy that we've got. We've put him in a suit and everything, but you know, come round and have a look at. He's still being exhibited.
Yeah.
Even if the reasons for it are more benign.
I mean, it's like they wouldn't have necessarily used the term like about getting published for a case back then, but it was the same sort of thing to put someone like in front of an audience and to exhibit your patient, exhibit your work.
Yeah,
it's the same thing as that.
Yeah, and there is an undercurrent of this, you know, all these people who are coming round and having dinner with him and things like that. It's like, yeah, how many of them are like, oh, have you heard about this guy with, you know, deformities that they've got up at that hospital? Shall we go around? And, you know, it's almost like, you know, the people who stare at accidents on a road as they go past. I feel like there's an undercurrent of that to it. And I feel like that's deliberate, and I think that is supposed to hold up a mirror to the audience to force us to go, you know, what would we be one of those people who'd be curious? It's
I mean, to that point, sorry to jump in, but it's like to that very point, it's Hannah Gordon. Sorry, it's just because I'm so rubbish with names, so I was looking up her name. When she first comes in, I like the fact that they showed her being shocked by his look, because despite our best kindnesses, if there is an instinctive reaction, sometimes that comes out and that does get seen.
Yeah,
and they kind of did that really nicely, where she did for a split second, then she recovered and she was perfectly nice to him, and that would seem like a very real moment. And it's like, you know, I don't think anyone would blame someone for a second while their better nature comes in and supposed they're just a moment's instinct.
It's truthful, and it's maybe something we don't like to admit about ourselves, but genetically we are built to be revulsed by, how to phrase it, unattractive things, you know, and that's the way we're built.
Like, I mean, if we just boil it down, it's like, you know, we attractiveness is based on symmetry.
Yeah,
that's just how it scientifically works. So anything which doesn't conform to that, like you say, we are genetically predisposed to it. Sorry, I hopefully helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that is what it is, and it's uncomfortable, and it should make you uncomfortable to think about it, and it is a thing that, yeah, I like to think that we try and be better than that, and we want to be better than that, but there's nothing wrong with showing within the body of a film that no, people, even the best meaning people, can react this way, you know.
And it's these moments throughout the film. Let's talk about John Hurt for a minute, because first of all, like, to put forward such vulnerability to Moat in the way he does behind the prosthetics, which he's using. And just very quickly, I just want to say that thing where they did it on stage, and you had Bradley Cooper, and he did this thing, and like, I'm not taking anything away, because he actually apparently risked. Doctors were warning him, like, if he kept on doing it, would do permanent damage to his cheek because the way he was controlling his face. But they decided not to use makeup to do the Elephant Man. I've got to say that seems, I don't quite get it. I don't quite get that, because it's like it's the guy genetically, like, his head did not look like how it's just with.
Yeah,
it's a weird thing, because I know it's kind of like the metaphor, I guess, would be blackface. like
'Cause
prosthetic to represent disability, but to not then represent that disability authentically doesn't feel right to me either.
Yeah,
I'll
like
give
'cause
that
I
a moment.
believe in this one they made the makeup based on casts that were taken of the actual person's
Mm.
head.
Yeah, if you
So
ever seen the original pictures,
he probably
so
looks as
respectful.
close as you could do to it.
See,
I
that's my thing.
can't
I
comment
think
on the Bradley Cooper thing. I've not
oh, well, just
seen it.
it was an interesting. This wasn't. This was a stage show, so he did it. It was either in Broadway or in London. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, that was a little aside. Uh, but there's also moments where I felt like I was almost unsure, and again, it's Lynch, so I will give him every credit that anything I think of, he's thought of, and more so. I think that he wanted to, like, there's moments where I don't know if like I'm projecting something onto John Hurt, because you can't, like, I swear there was a little movement in his face, which I'm sure there were as well, because John Hurt also was one of our finest actors, but I think there is a bit of it where you are kind of projecting something because you can't see every movement of his face.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Like, there was this one moment where he was talking about the society, and we'd just seen the society being really nasty about him, and they let him stay there because the Queen wrote a letter. Lovely scene. And it's when Anthony Hopkins talking to him about that, he goes, "Oh, please thank the society for me." And I just felt like, it's like, I bet he knows that they were arseholes. Like, I bet he knows that he don't really, like, he can't have not picked up on that. And he is still that grateful because it's like he's never been given anything. And it's like, yeah, of course. Like, I mean, I think he's like, he's such an empathetic character as well, because of the suffering he's been through. So I think he's like, of course they, would be wary of someone who's so different. Like, look, I'm going into his voice now. Like, look at me, look at the differences from me to most people. And I feel like that was all that, but I kind of sort of, I think the prosthetics as an extra thing which was there allowed you to do that, allowed you to sort of interpret certain things, put certain things on them.
Yeah, I think so. And just on the prosthetics, it was the sort of uproar that there was no recognition for this at the Oscars, that the next year they introduced the Best Makeup Oscar. It didn't exist before this, and I think it's fair to say this would have won it had it existed at the time. But
yeah, and while we're on the cast, I mean, first of all, just a couple of comments from our good friend Eraserhead. Hopkins is incredible. The shot of him tearing out the first time he sees Merrick is etched.
yeah.
His appreciation and thankfulness for simply being treated like a human being is humbling and saddening. Yeah, completely. And I just felt like throughout that, like this one scene, like any scene where you've got John Gielgud, John Hurt, and Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, that's pretty
you
good.
certainly got my attention for a moment.
Yeah.
And still, I've got to give it to Gielgud that when he enters the room, and I know part of it is his stature within the film, but I don't care what the film is. When he enters the room, he is the man. He's the boss. He is the one in charge. And here you see him using that with great empathy and great kindness. Other films, he might be using it for more nefarious ends, depending on the character. He is a god amongst god of actors. Like, he will just, he is central to everything. And it's like, I think it feels like Anthony Hopkins, also always a bit younger in his career, but like, he was always very commanding. But I think he had this ability to be very giving to the other actors in the scene, and like he was still dazzled, but he didn't need to take up all the space.
Anthony Hopkins, I think, is one of those actors who you can tell when he's invested in it because he's absolutely magnetic, and then you can tell when he's just phoning it in for a paycheck, which I don't blame him for. Transformers 5. You phone it in, Tony. Don't you worry, son.
Although he said that about
But-
the fucking Marvel films, he was brilliant as Odin.
Yeah, so they Odin. It was good.
He was saying something about, I don't know what the box I was doing there. It's like, you're being genius. Like, I don't.
It was
Man,
still
were you watching
great,
different films
but
from me?
yeah, there are films where he's not switching it on, and you
Yeah.
can tell. And fair play to him, but I think this is one of the ones where he is switching it on. But if we're talking about great British actors now, I mean, come on.
Oh, we got
In this film, you've got Michael Elphick, which anyone who remembers Boone.
Do you know, I recently kind of played him in Blue Remembered Hills, which was in BBC. I think it's BBC. I was in a stage production of it recently, and I played the Michael Elphick part. So yeah, that's my.
I can't take Michael Elphick seriously. Like,
no, I mean, there's so many. Oh, sorry, go on.
He's fine he's good in this, but all I think of is Boone and him there on his motorbike, like Io Silver, like just no.
Come along, Ranger,
Yeah,
flying on down to rescue you.
But one of the scenes he's involved in, I think, is the most horrific scene in the film, which is where he brings the ladies round and
including another. Sorry. I don't want to interrupt mid, so I'm going to get again here.
Go on,
because you cannot mention this scene without mentioning one of our acting greats, which is on screen in this scene. I speak of none other than Pauline Quirk from Birds of a Feather.
Oh, there we go. Then, yeah, was she in it? There you go.
Yeah, she was the youngest of the two women who they
didn't realise.
So they poured booze over him, and they the girls to get off with him.
And that scene, I think, is like where you see Lynch's horror. I just think it's absolutely horrific, and I believe this is still rated PG in the UK, so that would be what, G in America or whatever it is. And I just cannot believe that it hasn't got a higher rating. Like, I think that scene is just, it's raw, it's visceral, it's terrifying. I
mean, it takes you back, it takes you forward, I guess, to Maddie Palmer in Twin Peaks and her visceral and brutal murder. And it's like, these are sort of two ends of the same kind of scale, or two different ways of doing the same thing, however you want to word it. Like, there, it's just brutal, and it's just like in Twin Peaks, I mean, and it's just like, it's so harrowing the way they do it, and just you feel every moment of it. Here, it's almost like they do the opposite. Like, so the events that are happening to him physically will not harm too much. Like, probably it's a bit sort from them pushing him around and his back and everything, but like, it's psychologically torturing him. It's playing the music they play, which is like this kind of circus-esque music, which just the grim like the happiness of that against what you're seeing, and the contrast is just crushes you. Like, just, oh my God, stop it. Like, that's just it's and just it's that cruelty. Anyone who's been bullied, like, it just can feel every second of this moment. Basically, it's I mean, it might not have been exactly the same format, but just like you can feel it happening to you if you've been there, and it like you say, just such a brutal scene to watch.
Yeah, like, I'm just looking at the BBFC like website on it here, and
you're not looking at the cast list, are you? Because I want to ask you one.
No. How they've arrived at the rating. So it says, and also includes scenes where the sympathetic lead character is treated roughly and humiliated, for example, by the night porter. It is clear in these sequences that Merrick is vulnerable and being treated cruelly and unkindly, but the violence is not endorsed by the film. Under current guidelines, these moments are all also well contextualized and containable at PG, where horror guidelines direct the frightening sequences should not be prolonged or intense. See, I would argue that sequence does feel prolonged and intense.
And it's like it just shows you how we kind of like, I think wrongly kind of demonize or kind of like wrongly protect, like the things we choose to protect people from. It's like, so nudity, that's wrong and evil. Why? Like, it depends on context, but why necessarily? Swearing, that's, you know, it's generally frowned on by society, but it's not hurting anyone. But like psychological weird shit, and we're like, yeah, the kids should be fine. You know, we have some very weird, like, you know, Stephen Fry had this great thing. It's like, so you can't say the word fuck, which is about sex, which is a beautiful act. And a natural part of life, but you can say the word rape, which is a disgusting and vile. You know, it just shows you how
it is bizarre. Like, I found that scene more disturbing than most horror films that I've seen. You know, but there we go. We're not here to argue with the BBFC, but it does genuinely surprise me.
I did want to talk about some of the other people who featured here. You've got there's one of the guys near the beginning who, so he's around the circuits. He's the guy who basically, I remember him from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the TV show. He was the captain who was in the bath.
Right.
About to crash. Like, there was this ship full of idiots which was going to crash into discovers the Earth. Spoilers. He's there near the beginning as well. It's lovely. I mean, what I really liked about it was you had these luminaries who will be remembered throughout history, and then you've got random people who we know who they are. And one of the other ones was sorry, I'm gonna. Oh yeah, did you know who the kid was? Did you see in the credit?
Which kids?
The kid who's the main
Dexter Fletcher.
Yeah, Dexter Fletcher's in there.
Yeah, Dexter Fletcher.
And now huge director.
Yeah, I mean, big director, doing very well as a director.
What a weird arc of a story. Like, so he's a child actor in The Elephant Man. Press gang was absolutely huge.
Hosted one series of Games Master.
Of course, I was going to get to that. Yeah, like it just and now an absolutely amazing director. It's just what
very strange.
He's such an interesting, and it's really funny in interview as well. So yeah, props to him. We've got Anne Bancroft, of course, is just absolutely amazing, and yeah, again, her performance in Kindness here, like, it's kind of like, I did like the fact that even though, as I say, I praised Hannah Gordon for the kind of flinch moment they gave her, there was something kind of nice about then you could have Anne Bancroft not, and it also felt right as well. Like, it also felt like some people will be able to see past, or kind of like just be accepting of anyone for however they look, like instinctively on every level. And I'm pretty good at that, but I wish I was that good at that. You know, I'm sure there have been times where I've seen something which has just surprised me at first seeing it, and I've reacted, and then, you know, much like like in that other scene, you know, you just recover and be as kind as you can going forward. So yeah, but yeah, I'm just trying to see. I'm sure there was some other ones as well. Oh, Lindsay Dunlop, I recognize that name. So this is wonderful TV.
There's Kenny Baker.
Kenny Baker, yes, of course.
R2D2.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm getting distracted by myself now. Oh, you got David Lynch, Man in Bowler Hat in Mob Chasing Merrick. I did not notice that one. Anyway, there is some wonderful. This is why I don't usually have IMDb open. I get distracted easy. But throughout, it's just, again, there's just so much talent on the screen at any time. There's just so many moments where it's like, I do like those kind of, like, of course, big moments. Like, it's so iconic. Like, I'm not a monster, I'm a human being.
Yes,
it's one of those lines which echoes through history. But then you've kind of got just these small moments of just him. He gets this travel, like, shaving kit thing, you know, and he opens it, and it's the wonder, and it's like, it obviously is a very, very posh, very fancy one, which Anthony Hopkins has bought him, but like it could have been made of wood. It's the fact that he's been given something, that someone cared enough to think of him
Yeah.
You know, that's they had to make a grand one because, of course, the Doctor would have the money and would have bought a fancy one. And just to mention Anthony Hopkins again, first of all, man, how did I not as a child realize how Anthony Hopkins' Welsh accent comes through in everything he does? It's all I can hear now. But anyway, it's an English gentleman by way of Wales, certainly.
He was a young actor in these days, he was honing his craft.
Oh, for fuck's sake, he's the first Spaniard with a Welsh accent in Zorro.
Yeah, well, by that point, he was very rich and established and didn't have to hide his accent.
Anyway, I digress. But there's just so many shades he gets to play here. And as I say, I like the fact that, and of course, it's so Lynchian to show people's fallibilities. And the fact that he kind of gets caught up in his own bullshit. But again, Lynch has these absolutely massive moments, but they're never the ones which are kind of the cliched ones. So he doesn't do this moment of like the guy saying something really dramatically bad to John and insulting him, and then, oh my God, what have I become? It's like, it's more a human, natural moment of like, shit, I am treating like that. Like, fuck, I'm no better than those guys. Like, it's so human, it's so real. And that's what I love. Like, even in Twin Peaks, some of the most kind of weird moments, still, like, the moments of humanity are just like so relatable to every day in these kind of just massively weird world. You could even point to moments in Eraserhead, as weird as that world is, just pure everyday humanity that you recognize, being around a dinner table and some guy's got a dodgy leg telling you like his life history about that. That's just such a real human moment.
The awkwardness of going round to your in-laws for dinner sometimes, it's there.
But
it's just dialed up to 11 and beyond in Eraserhead.
It is, but it's just not. Yeah, again, he doesn't spike the moments everyone else would spike. It's always kind of like
agree.
When he goes big, it's because something big and weird is happening, and something that you would never expect. It's never those bits. I think Elephant Man is just one of the best films ever made. I really, just watching this again today, I was like, yeah, and I don't think there's many films as much as this one that every time I watch it, I see something different in it, and I experience something different based on where I am in my life. And I think Back to the Future is one of those touchstones for me because it's just a film I grew up with. So it's like, I'm worried I'm going to watch it and start seeing Doc Brown in myself. It's like very weird, and at his age, he's got to be having trouble with his circulation a little bit as well. So it's like so you relate to at different times. Any final thoughts on these? I want to raise head. Just fuck it. Like I'll say, see you in 10 years.
Yeah. No, I think we've had a good talk about them. I'm looking forward to seeing where Lynch's career goes next, because I think we've got one last attempt at the mainstream, whether it was him wanting to do that or the studios wanting him to do it or what have you, in June. But then we've got where I feel like Lynch kind of takes his final form with Blue Velvet, which it's not my favorite Lynch film, but I think it might be his best film. But
is that the one which is like renowned for being a little bit sexy?
Blue Velvet. We'll talk about that next time.
Jim, you went in some sultry tones. We'll talk about that a bit.
No, it's just it depends what you're thinking of as sexy. There's some things in it. There are some things in it that I would be concerned if you thought they were sexy.
Got you. I mean, again, I might be thinking of a different film. I just like, it's one of those titles which I remember. I think I remember someone telling me, but I could be confusing it with something else.
There is sex. There is sex in it. Whether it is sexy sex is perhaps up for debate. But
got you. We're also going to, along the way, I think there was a couple of Lynch details we end up with in the end. So I want to do My Beautiful Broken Brain, which is a sort of documentary film which Lynch is in, as well as I think producer on. Wasn't there one which you wanted to include as well, which you mentioned?
Oh, I can't remember. No, I thought we were just doing the filmography and that documentary, but yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Oh, there was wasn't there an article recently about how his pilot for a TV show that never got picked up is being made available or something? We said maybe if we can get hold of that, or if it,
forget all that. That's in.
or if it goes on one of the streamers. I think yeah, there's two projects that he did after Twin Peaks. One of them I think was still a collaboration with Mark Frost, and it was I think there were 3 episodes. Anyway, there's sort of these largely unseen works of Lynch that I'm pretty sure we looked at an article or something that said they were going on a streamer, but whether it's a US streamer or a UK streamer, and of course we have no other way of getting hold of anything like that unless it's available widely. So watch this space for that.
Well, this has been a pleasure as always, my friend.
Absolutely.
And to just stunning films like again, Elephant Man, Jesus Christ, like just the amount of audiences it reached, and anyway, and Eraserhead, just a true original. Thank you very much to our very own Eraserhead for joining us, dear friend. Please come back when we talk about the next couple, which me and Jim will sort out offline and try and give you a little bit of notice next time. It's me being disorganized. What can I say? I'm medically disorganized. Yeah. Anyway, I'm in Dr. Squee. With me this week has been my friend
Jim King.
And just because I'm almost pointing already, well, I was just there. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. And Eraserhead says, take care, people. And in a world where you can be truly anything, be not a monster, be but a man. Slightly clear up the quote.